Hi, I'm Cynthia Murphy.
Hi, I'm Georgie Bowers.
And this is Delete My Browser History. Welcome back. So we were saying last episode was all a bit of a rush at the end, but there's not much information on La Pascualita. If you Google her, you'll pretty much come up with what I came up with. We don't know why he put her in the window, but
No, there's a lot. Yeah, I think we
crazy
need more
people.
information, don't we? It's
Yeah.
very
I think that's definitely why it's classed as a bit of
anything to do.
folklore.
Yeah, anything to do with dummies and stuff like that is just very
So creepy. Yeah.
Yeah,
My
really
favorite
creepy.
murder, say, it's never a mannequin. You know, when people find a dead body and they go, I thought it was a mannequin. And they go, it's never a mannequin.
Did you hear about that guy who was stopped on the motorway by the police because people have been calling saying that someone had a body rolled up in a rug in the back of their car?
No. Was that
And
recent?
it was recent, yeah. And they pulled him over and he was on his way to a first aid course, and it was like it was one of those dummies that you practice on. And they were like, maybe don't roll it up in a rug next time.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe something you can probably put in the boot, isn't it?
Yeah. So what have you got for us? What have you got for us this time?
So I'm talking about two things today, but they kind of slot together. I'm talking about tarot cards and Ouija boards.
Ooh,
so
nice.
I was excited about this. The reason I picked them is because they're both in Last One to Die, and I put them together because they both actually originated as parlor games. So I'm going to dive a little bit into the history of them and where they actually came from. So I'm going to start with tarot. Tarot cards have been used in Europe since around the mid-15th century. And they're loosely based on a game called Italian Tarocchini, which is a complex trick-taking tarot game. It's still popular in Bologna, and it's confined mostly to that area now. So you can still go and play this game in Bologna. But there was also French tarot, which was a strategy game, which would be played by 3 to 5 people. And that is still the second most popular game in France. And it's played in French-speaking Canada. And then I'm going to mess this pronunciation up, but you've got Austrian Konigrufen, which is right call the king in German, and that's a 4-player trick-taking game. So tarot as we know it has derived from all these games. Some tarot decks were then used for divination from about the 18th century, and something called cartomancy, which is kind of reading the future based on the cards. And this led to custom decks being made for occult purposes. We like an occult purpose.
Of course.
The oldest surviving tarot cards are the Visconti Sforza tarot decks. These were painted in the mid-15th century for the rulers of the Duchy of Milan. And it's a collective term, so there was about 15 sets, and there's like bits and pieces of these sets left, so they're all kind of put together under that term of the Visconti Sforza tarot deck. They're now in various museums, libraries, and private collections around the world, such as the Morgan Library and Museum in New York, which has 35 of them. So the etymology, tarot comes from the Italian tarocchi. The origin's uncertain, but tarot was used as a synonym for foolishness in the late 15th and early 16th century. So I don't know if it's a bit of a, if you believe this, you're a bit of a fool kind of thing. The earliest evidence of tarot being used for cartomancy is from an anonymous manuscript in 1750. And that documents the divine meanings of those cards for the Bolognese tarocco. So the cards that were like famous in Bologna, somebody kind of ascribed different meanings to them all, saying, if you get this card, this is what it means for your future.
Oh, I
And
see.
so a bit
Right.
more like we would think of tarot cards now. So a deck called the Atelier was the first deck that was specifically made for occult purposes, and that was around 1789. And the themes in that related to ancient Egypt. So it's unsubstantiated, but some people believe that the cards actually come from ancient Egypt, from the Book of Thoth, and that's where they drew this inspiration from. Aleister Crowley, who the lovely Dawn mentioned in her demonology episode, he devised part of the Egyptian inspired deck, and I'll talk about him in a second, but you've got 3 common decks now that kind of exist around the world. So you've got the Tarot of Marseille, which is quite a common one when you when you see the kind of happy sun with flames around its head, that kind of famous tarot image, that comes from the Tarot of Marseille. You've got the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot deck, which I'm going to talk about in more detail, and you've got the Thoth tarot deck, which was devised by Aleister Crowley, and it's based on that tenuous Egyptian link. There's loads of variations of that now. I'm not going to tell you the rules relating to them because they're really boring. When I looked up, you can go on Wikipedia and it lists all sorts of stuff, but it's quite boring to go into, to just talk about. So I thought I would have a look at the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, because most decks that you will buy now with all different illustrations on, they're actually based on this deck. So according to Atlas Obscura, the Rider-Waite-Smith deck was first brought to life by a guy called Arthur Edward Waite. He was born in Brooklyn in 1857. His mum was English and his dad was American, and they eventually returned to the UK when he was 2 years old. He became interested in the occult when his sister died at a young age in 1874. So I think he became a little bit obsessed with trying to contact people who'd passed on. He was in things like the Freemasons, and he ended up becoming the enemy of Aleister Crowley. So they were actually in like a little cult thing together, and Arthur eventually broke off and did his own thing, and Aleister didn't like it very much. So they had lots of the same ideas, but they were basically, fighting for who was the big dog. So he became interested in his own version of the tarot when he went to the British Museum in 1908, and they had some black and white pictures of a 15th century set of tarot cards. So it was the Solar Busca deck, and that would prove inspirational to him and the next person I'm going to talk about. Now, this woman that I'm going to talk about just sounds amazing and a complete badass, and she has been completely erased from history, from as far as what I could see. You can find stuff about her, but she is so cool. I don't know why there's not more about her. And her name is Pamela Coleman Smith. Now, the Rider-Waite-Smith deck has her name in it now. For a long time, it was just known as the Rider-Waite deck because it was named after the men. Anyway, so she, her
Shock
nickname
horror.
was, I know, her nickname was Pixie. She was an artist, and she actually found out she lived in Manchester until she was 10, which I thought was a really cool fact. She was born in London. Wikipedia didn't have a date for her, but I found out she was born in 1878. Her dad was American and her mum was Jamaican. She traveled a lot as a child, and she studied art at the Pratt Institute in New York. So even though she was a mixed race woman in the kind of late 1800s, it sounded like her family were probably quite well off, and she got to do a lot of traveling, and she was quite privileged. So she didn't get a degree in the end, but she studied art and she went to become a commercial illustrator in London. She illustrated Bram Stoker's last ever published work.
Wow.
Which is called The Lair of the White Worm, and that was in 1911. Her art was colourful and unique. She published books on Jamaican folklore. I've written in brackets, she's a badass. And she was known to have a second sight. So when you see a picture of Pamela, she is everything that you want her to be. She is this witchy, kind of mixed race lady with fabulous hair, and you know, she looks like this arty kind of witchy woman, and she looks like someone I want to be friends with. So apparently she painted pictures based on visions that she'd had, and she would do it all while listening to music, so you could just imagine that. And she met Arthur Edward Waite in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. So that's something that Aleister Crowley was part of. So when he left, she left with him. He commissioned her to illustrate a new tarot deck. So within 6 months, she had illustrated the whole thing, and they were primarily used for divination. So all of the images are packed with meaning. So when you look up the original deck, every single picture that she's done has got a lot of meaning in there. It was published by the Rider Company in 1909 and known as the Rider-Waite deck, which completely erased her, considering she's the one who drew them all. But it's now known as the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. I'm just trying to figure out what I've written there. So his obituary didn't mention them, apparently, according to Wikipedia. So even though his name is on them, it wasn't something that was mentioned after he died. And she did not have an obituary, even though she was awesome.
Yeah.
And since they were incepted, they have never gone out of print. So there's always been some kind of version of this deck in print since 1908, which is crazy.
Yeah,
So I had a look, I was just having a look to see if I could get different images of the decks, and there is actually, on Atlas Obscura events, there is an event in August this year, and it's like a Zoom event, and it's with the museum in New York that I mentioned, and they're going to show the Visconti Sforza deck. So they're going to actually show these 15th century cards. So I can put a link on for that. I'm not sure if it's paid or not, but it would be quite a cool thing to see if you're interested in tarot.
I did not know that. I really didn't know any of that about tarot cards, because you just hear tarot cards and you think, yeah, tarot cards, I know all about those. I didn't know that there was like these different types, and that they all originated from these, you know, particular people. And
and it makes you wonder, like, are they, so when people use them, do they have any meaning, or is it the person putting their meaning onto it, or are they magical, or, you know, people still play with them in Europe as like
wow.
So it takes me nicely onto Ouija boards, because again, it's something that started as a game. So a Ouija board is also known as a spirit board or a talking board. And in case you're not familiar with what they look like, they're normally a flat board. They're usually rectangular. They've got an alphabet that kind of goes in a curve from A to Z. They've got the numbers 1 to 9, or maybe 0 to 9. And they've got yes, no, and goodbye on there as well. So you need to use a planchette, which is a heart-shaped piece of wood or plastic, and you put your hand on the planchette and it moves around and it spells out messages. So the term Ouija is actually a trademark of Hasbro. So the games company, so they've trademarked the name. But it is used as a generic term for kind of any kind of talking or spirit board. So there's a little bit with the etymology. There was a misconception. It used to be believed that Ouija was from French yes and French German, and it was mashed together. So it was French and German yes. but it's actually taken from a guy who, he wasn't the inventor, but he's the guy who claimed to be the inventor. He asked the board what its name was, and that's what it spelled out.
Oh,
So it named itself.
it's a good name though, isn't it?
It is a good name, and I understand. I get that Ouija, the French German thing, because it does sound a bit French. However, there are lots of precursors to the Ouija board. So automatic writing in China in 1100 AD, according to some historical documents. So apparently in the Song dynasty, they did a thing called Fuji, which meant planchette writing. And it was a type of way for spirits to speak to them or people to speak through them. And then talking boards were used a lot in the US Civil War, which we've talked about before. People became kind of obsessed with death because it was so common, and they would use it to contact dead relatives. So there was all these different little precursors, and in 1901, a businessman called Elijah Bond decided he would patent his own board. So he printed a board and a planchette, and he took it to the patent office. He got one, so he businessified it, basically. Is that word, businessified?
I think so.
And his employee, William Fuld, took over the production. William Fuld was the one who was told what the Ouija board was called. It was produced by Charles Kennard of Kennard Novelty Company. And Fuld, the employee, actually claimed it as his own invention. So I'm not quite sure what happened to the original guy, but it kind of went under Fuld's name for ages. And soon it became so popular that competitors started putting out their own boards as well, and they flooded the market.
Wow.
Smithsonian Mag talks about the adverts that you would get in the newspapers at the time. So they would have things like Ouija, the wonderful talking board, $1.50. And I found an old ad that I can put on the Instagram. So does it work? Does it not? Because it's something that was kind of made and branded and sold as a toy. So you've got some scientists who believe that it does work, but it's an unconscious muscular exertion. So it draws on the unconscious mind of the person using it. So the planchette does move seemingly on its own, but your subconscious mind is moving it around. And it's been described as a con to part fools from their money. In religious terms, Christians absolutely hate them. They are blamed for demons, witchcraft. They've been burned numerous times. I found in New Mexico, they burned them alongside some Harry Potter books in 2001. Wow. Christians believe that this is information that is only for God's hands. So putting it into the hands of humans is a tool of Satan, and it's Satan trying to kind of mess things up. So in history and in the media, you've got Aleister Crowley again. He used one. Apparently he was going to make his own version, but then couldn't be bothered. It never happened. There's one used in The Exorcist. Regan, the girl who becomes possessed, uses one and talks to Captain Howdy, who ends up being a demon. You've got the Paranormal Activity films. Apparently, they use a Ouija board in them, and it makes the entity even worse. There's a film called Ouija from 2007, where a murderous spirit follows the kids who use it around. There's a similar film of the same name from 2014 as well. And this fun fact that I found out afterwards, Fuld, so the guy who said he had created it and who asked the Ouija board what its name was, he died in 1927 after a freak fall from the roof of a new factory that the Ouija board had told him to build.
Oh gosh,
yeah.
He should not have listened to that Ouija board.
No, but it just made you wonder, doesn't it? So was the Ouija board like controlling him or something?
Yeah.
And then I had a look for Ouija boards that you can buy now, and my favourite was from a shop on Etsy called the Living Plastic Store, and it's a Barbie Ouija. And instead of yes, no, and goodbye, it says totally yes, totally no, and bye for now. And it's hot pink.
Of course.
So there we go, two
Wow.
kind of spooky spiritual things that actually started off as party games.
Yeah, I was going to say that's really interesting because you talk about like, you know, can kind of get on board with tarot cards, just let someone else do their thing with it.
Yeah.
But Ouija boards, if you'd like, if I was somewhere and everyone was like, let's do a Ouija, I would be like, I am leaving. So
Yeah,
it's really funny to think that it like it's just the trade name of the game that Hasbro bought out.
This is it. And I
It's
mean,
really funny.
there was like
Okay,
yeah,
what's happened?
it just said you have changed to earphones, and I hadn't, but there we go, I have now.
Weird.
So, weird. Well, this is it. Maybe the Ouija's telling me to stop talking about it.
But it's funny that it just started off as a game. You know, that would have been let's make this game, and now people just, you know, people use them all the time, don't they, to contact the dead
and believe that they can contact the dead. And I mean, growing up as a Christian, I was terrified of them. And even though now I know the history behind it and that it's a game, I'm still not doing one.
No way. No way. No, thank you. Put that board away.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So there we go. Right. What have you got to tell me about this week?
Lovely. Well, I am going to talk to you about Bella in the Wych Elm.
Oh, yes. Okay.
So, have you heard about her?
I have. I've heard a couple of podcasts talk about her before.
Yeah. So I came across Bella. She was in the Fortean Times. She was on the front page, and I'd not heard of her. And it was such, obviously, it's a really interesting story, and unsolved. Obviously, really spoke to me. And there's a scene in Mark of the Wicked where they find a dead body in a tree, but not in the tree trunk, in the branches. So yeah, it just kind of really, just the idea of it. So I've just pulled together, because there's a couple, as you said, there's a couple of podcasts. There's also a documentary on Amazon Prime, which I've been told is quite good. It's only a short one. Okay. So I haven't watched it yet, but it has been recommended. But you can find, there's all sorts of places on the internet you can read about this. So the story of Bella in the Wych Elm. At dusk in April 1943, 4 teenage boys were going through Hagley Woods. Now, Hagley Woods had a reputation for like maybe it was haunted or the occult or something. I've tried to find like what the reputation was, but I can't find anything. It all just refers to what we're about to talk about. So whether it really was haunted, I don't know. But they were hoping to do a bit of poaching some rabbits, because obviously it was during the war and rationing was going on and stuff. So they spotted the tree, the Wych Elm, and decided to climb up into it to see if they could find some eggs, possibly. And one of them climbed up and he peeked down inside the trunk, the hollow trunk, and saw there was something white. And so he was like, oh, jackpot, reached in, pulled it out, and it was a human skull. At first he thought it was an animal skull, and then he realized it had bits of hair and like human teeth in it. So obviously they all completely freaked out and ran home and said that they would never tell anybody about it because they thought they would get in trouble. But one of them did tell their parent, and the police were called and obviously went to the area and soon said that, you know, that there was a crime to be investigated. So the police found the skeleton, the remains of this person in the tree trunk. It was a woman, and her hand had been removed, and the bones of her hand were scattered around the tree. She was wearing a ring
on the outside of the tree or inside?
not inside, on the outside. She was
Oh.
wearing a ring, and her shoes were also found a distance away. So they found her shoes as well, but also there was a piece of taffeta fabric inside her mouth.
Ooh.
So, and they think that she was suffocated. So the medical examiner, he concluded that she was about 35 years old. She had really irregular teeth on her upper jaw. Her teeth really like protruded. She had light brown hair. She was 5 foot tall, so she was only small. And like I said, they reckon that she'd been there for about 18 months. He also said that based on, you know, the autopsy or what have you, she'd given birth at least once in her life. So she was, yeah, so it's just really sad, this poor woman. But he was certain it was murder. He said there's no way that anybody could like commit suicide by crawling inside a tree trunk and dying that way. And he said that he thought that she was murdered and then very quickly put inside the trunk, because it would have been impossible with the rigor mortis to kind of ease her into it. So he said that she was murdered quite near the trunk and near the tree and put inside. And he said, this is what he said: "It was an excellent place for the concealment of a murder, and I think it indicates local knowledge." So he reckoned it was somebody who was local to that tree.
I was going to say that, because how would you know a tree was hollow?
Yeah,
it's something that you know or you don't, isn't it? So to then,
yeah, it's weird. So following this discovery, the police contacted every dentist in the area, but no one had any records of this woman, and they also went through their missing persons file, but again, she didn't show up in there. So she sort of, after a little while, obviously it was all everybody was talking about, but then after a little while people just sort of forgot about it, because the war was still going on, and people were talking about other things and distracted by other things. So this poor woman was sort of forgotten about, really, until about 6 months later, graffiti started appearing in the area. Now, the first bit of graffiti, which was written in chalk on the side of a house, said, "Who put Lubella down the Wych Elm?" Ooh. Yeah, so they referred to her as Lubella in that first one, but then over the coming months, similar messages started appearing. They all seem to be written in the same hand, although I have seen pictures and I'm not sure whether they're the same handwriting, but gradually they took the same form, and they all said, "Who put Bella in the Wych Elm?" And this just kept appearing all over the area.
Who called her Bella?
The person who did the graffiti. So it seemed that they knew the name of her, or they'd given the name Bella to this particular to her. They didn't have a name for her before that. So there's all these theories about who she was and how she got there. So one of the theories is, of course, it was a black magic ritual. According to an anthropologist called Professor Margaret Murray, the fact that Bella's hand was severed at her arm and the bones were scattered is similar to an occult ceremony known as the Hand of Glory. Now I've looked up the Hand of Glory only on Wikipedia, and it says that the Hand of Glory is the dried and pickled hand of a hanged man. Yeah, because it's an old folklore, isn't it? That like and then you can carry it around with a candle in it. Yeah, and it's like it repels people. It's meant to light that. Yeah, it's meant to help you get away with like dastardly deeds, basically. Yeah. So I don't think that does sound like the same thing at all, because her hand was like removed and then scattered everywhere. So, but I think they just liked the, it makes it sound a bit more interesting. And because it was noted that the plant belladonna, deadly nightshade, and witch hazel are both widely associated with the occult. And like I said, Hagley Woods was. And the fact that she was entombed inside the tree instead of being buried is also is like indicative of ritualistic slaying. And also there was another murder nearby, I think, where somebody, I think he was a farmer, sorry, I've just lost the screen. A farmer was found pinned to the ground with his pitchfork. Oh. and they reckon that that was also occultish, as you would, I suppose. Sorry, just lost the screen. Yes, so there was that theory. And then later on, the Wolverhampton Express and Star received a letter from somebody who claimed to have information about the identity of Bella, saying that she was a member of a spy ring seeking information about the location of local munitions factories that could be targeted by Luftwaffes. So with the timing, I think that was something that obviously spoke to people. This lady who wrote into the newspaper, she was later identified as someone called Una Mossop, and she said that her RAF pilot husband, Jack Mossop, had witnessed Bella's death. And she said that Mossop told her that he'd become involved in a spy ring along with a Dutchman called Van Rout. And one evening they took Bella, they picked Mossop up in his car, and then shortly after, this Dutch fella, the Dutchman, he strangled her. And then because of her spy association, and they put her in the tree. But why the taffeta and stuff? So I'm not sure about that one. And then there was some declassified MI5 files that again supported this spy theory about a chap he was a German spy called Joseph Jacobs, and he was captured after breaking his ankle when he parachuted into Cambridgeshire in 1941, and he had a creased photograph of a glamorous German actress and cabaret singer called Clara Borel. So Clara, Bella, Borel, but no, Borel. He told his interrogators that she was his lover and that the Third Reich had recruited her as a spy. According to him, she had parachuted into the West Midlands and she disappeared. So could that be her? People again were quite excited about this theory, the idea of an actress and cabaret singer being a spy, but she was 5'10", so she was too tall.
Bella was way too tall. Yeah.
And apparently there's record to say that she died. She was already dead, I think, in a Berlin hospital. So there was that theory sort of gone out the window. And then there was BBC Radio 4 did a programme, and they suggested that Bella was a prostitute who worked in the area, and she disappeared. This, according to police files, Bella had disappeared in 1941, which would kind of fit the timeline of events, but she didn't, this prostitute didn't appear on the missing persons. Maybe they didn't count them as a missing person if they were, I don't know.
Probably not. No, I think with a lot of like sex work, it was just seen as you were asking for trouble. And I mean, it's still seen like that now, isn't it? And
it's so sad. She's just, people still don't really know who she is, but the hypothesis that people seem to go with now, that she was just a homeless woman with no loved ones to report her missing, and she was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I think the thing that gets me is the hand. Why was her hand removed and then the bones scattered? But then they said it might have been animals that had done that. Had someone put her in,
that's true.
Then were like, here, we'll get you out again, and she gave them her hand, and they were like, no, you're staying in there, and cut her hand off. And then she just sort of, because I guess in those days, how much information would they have been able to extract from doing the post-mortem?
And how well was it done if it was just somebody who was assumed to be a sex worker with no family? Like, did they even bother? Or if it was seen to be a spy thing, was it all kept very on the down low?
So they not recently, a few years ago, they were able to reconstruct what her face would have looked like from her skull, from the human skull that they'd found. So I'll send you the link because you can see what they think she looked like. And
surely now, like, if they've still got bones and stuff, they could use ancestral DNA.
And I think
trace it.
Every now and again, apparently, that graffiti pops up again in the local area. Obviously, it's not the same person doing it, but as you say, the way what they have to hand now to sort of learn more about a person. but the photo of her is such a close-up, because I was looking at it on my iPad, and I sort of opened it up and then scrolled down, and like her face just took up the whole of the screen, and I was like, she's gonna smile or blink or something. It was really eerie. But yeah, poor Bella in the Wych Elm.
Oh, it's one of those, isn't it, that will never get solved.
No,
unless somebody does take the time to try and trace like a family member and then trace it back.
Yeah.
But I like the spy theory, because I think it is very of the time.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
But it does seem ritualistic, the hand removing the hand, and also like the tattoo in her mouth. And why were her shoes? Did her shoes come off in a struggle? But they reckon she'd been there for 18 months. So why wasn't she found before? And if these lads, it was obviously a place that they went to a lot, because there wasn't much to do around that time, was there? And I don't know. It's a mystery.
Very interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's Bella in the Wych Elm.
I wonder if we'll ever find out.
Maybe there might. I'm going to watch this documentary, I think, see if there's any other hypotheses.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. So that was for Mark of the Wicked, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Or kind of.
Yeah, where they find a body in the tree. Just like the idea of it, really.
But you've got someone in the witching well as well, haven't you? Did that not?
Yeah, I loved the who put Bella in the Wych Elm. I thought it's got such a lovely ring to it.
Yeah.
And so I had Ivy down the witching well.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ivy down the witching well, who was a witch who got thrown down a well. Yeah, and died down there.
Poor Ivy.
Yeah, but they all carried on throwing their trinkets and things down the well to try and get her to do her magic for them.
I wonder is there anything at that tree? Does that tree still exist?
No, the tree's not there anymore. But you can.
Really?
I'll send you some links, because you can see the like the photographs and stuff that the police took, and they're like little notes, like where she was found and everything. You can see a picture of her skull, and
yeah. Oh, thanks. Yeah.
You like looking at skulls.
Okay. Right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll see you next time.
See you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Browser history deleted.